Today we're going to talk about vices and how they affect your dating relationship. If you want to have a conversation with your significant other and they don't listen to you, like, there's a bigger problem at hand.
Yeah, I think that everyone has a vice or a vice that they're most susceptible to. And I think over time, as we mature, we become less and less susceptible to it if we work on it. So when we talk about vices, we're talking about like things that are bad habits or parts of ourselves that almost like soothe through negative outputs. So like it'd be like alcohol or inputs. It'd be like alcohol. It could be
Would like scrolling on your phone be a vice?
yeah. Social media, addiction to social media could be a vice. Gambling, anger, road rage,
Overeating?
recreational drugs. Yeah.
Basically any bad habit you could think of, I guess.
Someone recently
Smoking?
called lateness a vice.
Lateness.
I was interested in that. I was like, oh.
How is that a vice?
Yeah, I think they were just saying that like it's like a bad habit that affects yourself and others. Should that be our working definition?
A bad habit that affects yourself and others. I like
Negatively. That negatively affects yourself and others.
that. I like that.
Yeah, I guess negatively is intuited
In bad
habit.
Yeah. Great definition.
If you have a better working definition for vices, let us know. But I think it's important to think about our vices because sometimes they're inherent to who we are. Sometimes they're developed sociologically. So for example, if I have a friend group that constantly gambles and like the way we bond is through gambling, that could fuel an addiction that leads to a breakdown of relationships.
Wait, so is a vice always an addiction? Like, can you gamble as a vice but not be addicted to gambling?
I think so. Like, okay. I think, for example, a vice could be alcohol without you being an alcoholic.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
Like someone could say.
But then it's like, all right, should you question if you're an alcoholic, if alcohol is a vice for you?
Yeah, but I guess for me specifically, and let's embrace this tangent a bit.
Okay.
So for alcoholism specifically, I think you're an alcoholic where it's like no matter the time of day, no matter the mood, no matter like work or recreation or before a sport, after a sport, like I need a drink. Whereas there's someone who could just have one drink every day. And I wouldn't really call them an alcoholic, but they might say, oh, it's a vice of mine.
Because I've heard, sorry, I will end this tangent after this. I've heard some people who are that I only have one drink a day at the end of the day people say, oh, I came to realize I'm actually an alcoholic.
Oh, interesting.
Because they need that drink at the end of the day.
Maybe that's it.
They don't drink during the day, but like if they don't get that drink at the end of the night, like they just can't even function. And so that's what their need tied to it. It's not just like a cute like, oh, that's just a thing I do. It's like, oh my gosh, I need this.
I think it's the need.
Yeah.
I think it's a need. Like if you feel like at the end of the day, I could go to bed with or without a drink, you it's probably not a vice or it's probably not like an addiction or you're probably not an alcoholic. Yeah. But if you're like, oh, I can't go to bed. And this is like 7, 10, 15 nights in a row.
Yeah.
Without soothing yourself through that.
It's not like a one-off. Yeah.
Yeah. Tangent done. I do want to talk about vices and how they can affect our dating and marriages, dating relationships and marriages. Because I think sometimes we put vices in a category of like, oh, they're just cute. Like, oh, I just like a drink, or I like having a good time, or I know how to let loose.
Yeah.
Gambling, for example. We make it like, oh, it's fun. It's what I do as a hobby.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you don't have like a good control over them, they could control you and your relationships. What are your reflections on that? Like in context of vices, marriages, dating, like if someone says, oh, I have this vice, I don't want to have it any longer. What would you tell them?
I feel like sometimes with vices, it takes someone so long to get to that point of like, I have this and I don't want to have it any longer.
What if we went like this?
The damage is done.
What if we went like, I am a regular gambler, but I don't see how it's affecting my relationship. What should I do? Or say it's a girlfriend saying like, oh, my boyfriend has this problem with whether it be drinking or gambling or smoking, but he doesn't see it as an issue. Like, what would you tell her?
He doesn't see it as an issue. I mean, it's an issue if you feel like if the girlfriend feels impacted by it.
it's an issue.
Then it's an issue.
But what
I feel like we should use an example that's like a little bit more like close to home, like video games. That's what's really coming to mind for me.
Okay.
Does that feel okay?
Are you talking about my addiction to video games?
No, not yours. No, sorry. Close to home for like people watching.
For the record,
like,
I don't play
video personally
games,
don't know a lot of gamblers. Like I'm sure that I know they're out there.
Okay, yeah.
But like I feel like people might be able to be like, oh yeah, video games. Like my boyfriend plays video games all the time, and it's so annoying.
I love that.
And it feels like it's impacting our quality time together, and like So I don't know. It's a conversation. It's kind of hard. It's like. If you want to have the conversation with your significant other and they don't listen to you, like there's a bigger problem at hand.
Yeah.
Like,
I think one thing I would say is like I'd say have the conversation. I think on both sides you have to be honest with yourself and each other. Like so if you're the one who has the vice, you have to ask yourself like has this become something that exceeds like hobby territory to the point where it's affecting my relationships? It's affecting my wife, or it's affecting my boyfriend, or whoever perspective it's from. And what am I willing to do to change this? And I think that sometimes like people don't get to like treat a vice as a vice and actually work towards almost like minimizing its significance in their life because they don't name it as that, and they can't like get to the point where they see it as a negative thing.
Yeah, I think too like having the conversation with the person that has the vice shouldn't be like a moment of anger, like you always do this and I'm sick and tired of this. Like it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
It should be we're sitting down, we're both calm, we're having this intentional conversation because that's going to go over probably a lot better than you blowing up because you just let it fester for so long.
Yeah. I feel like this conversation is so subjective. Even before we started filming, I was kind of thinking like, you can't be really prescriptive about this conversation. It's more like setting the stage so that other people can have conversations about this in their relationship.
Yeah, like we're talking about it, but like video games, for example, might not bother you at all. Like maybe it's like totally fine and it's not a big deal in your relationship. Or you might be listening totally struggling like, my boyfriend plays video games all the time and it's really hard for me.
And then I feel like we're picking on video games.
Yeah, sorry, I keep using that example.
Video games aren't like inherently bad.
Yeah, I was trying to just
you'd be talking about like the excessiveness of it, right?
Yeah, sorry. The excessiveness, if it's like, what's our definition? Bad habit that's negatively impacting your relationship. If it's that.
You know what it should be instead of bad habit? Because
a habit.
Yeah. Because video games isn't a bad habit. It's like a habit that negatively affects you and others.
Yeah, you and others.
Because of the extensive nature of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that we're kind of live
processing.
I think it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people they're unaware of, like, actually I'm thinking right now, like, what are my vices? Would you say everyone has a vice? Like, or do you think like some people just don't? I would say maybe scrolling on social media could be one for me. Probably.
I think that everyone has a vice or a vice that they're most susceptible to. And I think over time, as we mature, we become less and less susceptible to it if we work on it. But I think that we have a certain like psychological like disposition that leads us to specific vices. So it's like one of mine is like overwork. And it's like my psychological disposition, because I like getting things done and I also love what I do.
Yeah.
And I love almost like the rush of checking things off a to-do list.
Yeah.
I can pour myself disproportionately into work in a way that could get in the way of relationships or friendships.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I think everyone has almost like a vice disposition.
Yeah, it's like when people, like, you've probably heard, like, when someone says like, oh, I have an addictive personality, so like I've never tried drugs because I know it would just be bad for me.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. And I think that depending on your family, like there's some, like I have a friend, for example, who it's in his family to be angry. Like anger problems, anger management is like a hard thing, like generationally. So he works at being like a person of joy, a person who's patient, a person who's self-controlled, because he doesn't want to live into that.
Yeah.
I think I can confidently say, and maybe this is a pessimistic take, So I'd love to kind of hear in the comments if you disagree, but I would lean towards saying that everyone has a vice that they're predisposed towards.
Like prone to.
Mm-hmm. And based on their like sociology and their like almost like reining themselves in, they're either more or less living that out or expressing that through their life.
What would be a good replacement for a vice?
A positive vice.
A positive vice.
So, for example,
good
like
habit that positively impacts even others. Like, if you're like, okay, I gotta stop doing that. What should I? Do you think it's also not prescriptive?
Yeah, I think that's also not prescriptive. I would say for example, someone's addicted to porn, and they recognize that it's a way for them to release pent up testosterone if they're a man. I don't know how estrogen works and in the same conversation for women, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say a man. He releases testosterone, he gets validation through it, and it relieves stress. I would say like pick up a sport, say it's like, I don't know, a flag football league or a basketball league where you can join it, where you're able to release testosterone, get validation through scoring goals or points, and then also relieve stress. And sometimes it's not fully like replaceable, and you usually have to partner something. Like if you're trying to recover from a porn addiction, you have to like partner that with like accountability and putting limitations on your devices and blocking certain websites on your phone or laptop. But I think there are ways for people to replace every vice, but I think that it's not just like a cold turkey, but I think that there's like it could be cold turkey, but it needs to be replaced by something, I think. So I would say replace it with something that's healthy, that caters to or solves most of, if not all of the things that the negative vice was catering to.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's like a bit of like a withdrawal period almost.
There
like,
is, yeah.
For example, I'm thinking of like scrolling on my phone, like could be replaced with reading, for example. But like reading doesn't have the same like dopamine hits that scrolling on your phone does. But so I bet you there'd be a period where it feels like, oh, this is kind of boring.
Yeah.
But then I grow to enjoy reading.
Yeah.
That's the hope over time.
And I think that like for that example, it's like finding the ultimate pursuit as a different thing. So it's almost like changing the ultimate win. So the ultimate win, scrolling social media, is staying up to date and the dopamine hit. But maybe you want to change your identity. A book we would definitely recommend is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Super good book. But like almost like changing your ultimate goal in that free time when you adjust towards reading to like freeing your mind and embracing the creativity of another. So it's like you're reading these books because you're wanting to free your mind and embrace the creativity of another. So it's like where social media is filling your mind and like almost like taking in these micro expressions of creativity. Yeah. Guys, someone's awake.
I don't know if you can hear, but it's loud.
We usually film during nap time, so he's awake.
Nap time
Thankfully,
is over.
We're pretty much done.
Yeah.
But I think that, when we're thinking through vices, it's so important to replace different things.
His vice is milk.
Here, I'm going to keep going.
Okay.
So, we've never done this before. But when it comes to vices, it's so important to not only like replace the vice with a positive thing, but also change your mindset that was feeding into your addiction to that vice. So for Mariah's example with reading instead of scrolling social media, it's like the mindset was, I'm flooding my mind with these different inputs through reels or whatever, and I'm getting this dopamine hit. Be like, that is no longer my primary goal with my free time. Now my primary goal is embracing the creativity of one person and continuing to almost like delve into this period of freeing your mind of distractions in order to fill your mind with the beauty of someone else's curiosity. Thank you so much for your patience with us as we wade into the realities of being new parents. If you have any comments about vices or anything we talked about on this video, we'd love to see that below. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. And if someone would be served by one of our videos, especially this one, make sure to share it with them because it would help us, and then hopefully it would help them as well. Anyways, all the best and see you next time.